Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. The first match of today, February 19th, is Neeko versus Myth, the two weaker players in the A group. So Neeko does have the higher rating, but both of these players are very new to chess, and anything could really happen. So let's just see how the games went. Neeko had the white pieces in the first game. She starts with G3, a new start from Neeko. Normally she goes for this F4 move on the first move, the bird opening. So maybe we'll see a different strategy from Neeko in this match. We have E5 from Myth, and now F4 from Neeko. However, even on move 2, this is already a huge mistake from Neeko. So maybe she meant to play F4 on the first move, but forgot what she was doing, and so she decided to play the second move. However, you can't actually play F4 here because now Black already has this pawn on E5 controlling the F4 square. And this actually allows Black to take this pawn, and you can't take this pawn back as white. You can't play G takes F4, because if you do play G takes F4, which is a very natural move, especially for a beginner, then we have Queen H4 checkmate. And if this happened on board, this would have just been legendary. This would definitely go down in PogChamps history, a 3-move checkmate. But this did not happen because Myth did not play E takes F4. Both players were moving very quickly in the opening, and I think this is a very common thing among chess players where they think they can just play automatically in the opening and play very quickly in the opening. But tactics can still happen, and positional blunders can still happen in the opening. So I think it's important to be taking your time in the opening too, and not just be moving extremely quickly just because it's the opening. So lesson here is take your time in the opening. We have D6 from Myth instead, and now Neeko initiates this trade, so she gets rid of this chance for Myth. She plays F takes E5, and we have D takes E5, Bishop G2 from Neeko, Knight F6, Knight F3, Knight C6, and castles. Both players are developing and getting castles. We have Bishop F5 and D3, Bishop C5 check, and here King H1 would have been fine, but we have E3 instead from Neeko, which is a fine move as well. But you're probably going to want to play a move like King H1 later just to unpin this pawn. You probably want this pawn on E4 anyway, so I would have preferred King H1, but E3 is a totally fine move as well. We have castles from Myth, and now A3 from Neeko. And this castles move is actually a mistake, because when Myth developed his bishop to F5, now with this half-open F-file, Neeko's rook is staring at this undeveloped bishop. So Neeko can now move her knight anywhere, including taking this pawn, and that would unleash a discovered attack on Myth's bishop. So you have to be careful about putting your pieces on undefended squares in the opening. Here this bishop probably would have been better on E6 or even G5, because here when Myth castles, he's actually allowing Neeko to play this tactic knight takes E5, and after knight takes E5, we would have rook takes F5, for example. And Black's not even out of the water yet, because this is a skewer on the knight and the bishop. If you try to defend your bishop like this with knight E7, now we have D4, kicking the bishop back to B6, and then bishop takes B7, rook B8, and bishop C6, for example. And White has a really huge center. Black's pawns are shattered. White's up a pawn. So this is already a great position for White. But Neeko did not go for that. Instead, she simply plays A3. So maybe she just didn't recognize that this bishop was undefended and she had this discovered attack. We have knight D5 and now attacking this E3 pawn. And we have D4 from Neeko defending. We have E takes D4 and E takes D4 and bishop D6. Myth saves his bishop. We have C4 from Neeko, striking in the center. I really like this move. So good job for her on that. And Myth saves his knight with knight F6. We have knight C3 looking to complete development, and rook E8. Myth grabs the open file. Very good from him. Not like that, but you know what I meant to do. We have knight E5, and this actually loses a pawn because... so we talked about this, how this is a discovered attack. So this is a discovered attack on Myth's bishop. So he's got to do something about that. However, things get really complicated. First, I just want to mention that a better move than knight e5 would have probably just been b4, for example. Just continuing this queenside pawn storm. Also, you're now giving you the option to develop this bishop to b2 if you want to later in the game. And now let's talk about why knight e5 is not the best move because it actually just drops a pawn. After bishop takes e5, we could have d takes e5. Rook takes f5 isn't actually the best here because if Neeko plays rook takes f5, we would have bishop takes d4, and this saves the bishop and is checked. So white would lose a piece and a pawn and only gain a piece back for it. So after king h1, and now black's up a pawn, he wants to initiate more trades. We could have bishop takes c3. Now white needs to trade queens in order to avoid losing material because this is also a discovered attack on the queen. So we would have queen takes d8, rook a takes d8, and now b takes c3. But black can initiate even more trades and go into a winning endgame after rook d1 check. Here you can't play bishop f1 because of rook e1, and this is actually a fork on the two bishops. Both bishops are attacked twice, so kind of a weird looking fork, but it is a fork. So instead you have to play rook f1, and still we have rook e1, once again forking this rook and the bishop. So white has to do something, and this allows black to trade even more. So bishop b2, for example, we could have rook takes a1, bishop takes a1, bishop takes a1, rook takes f1, and bishop takes f1. And we would go into this endgame where white has this shattered queenside pawn structure, black is up a pawn, and it's these two active knights versus these two bishops. And this bishop is going to take a while for it to get back into the game. So definitely a winning endgame for black here, and this is just a very forcing line that black could have gone into with bishop takes e5 after knight e5. So bishop takes e5, definitely the better move to go for. However, the move that Myth played, knight takes e5, is okay too. It's just now you're not attacking this d4 pawn, so you allow this rook takes f5 move, and white is doing completely fine here. However, Neeko did not play this rook takes f5. Instead, she played d takes e5, just recapturing that knight. And here, black has two pieces hanging, so they need to do something about that. Here, Myth should have played a move like bishop g4. This saves the bishop and also counterattacks the queen. So first the queen has to move queen b3, for example, and now you can actually capture this pawn on e5. And once again, black is up a pawn. Black's going to be doing very well here. So Myth could have gotten back into the game with bishop g5, but instead we have simply bishop takes e5, and this is a total blunder because you didn't save both of your hanging pieces. So Neeko can still play this rook takes f5 move. However, as we can see by the times here, both players still moving very quickly. So I don't think she saw this rook takes f5 move, because instead she played bishop takes b7. We have bishop takes b7, and yeah, this is definitely a mistake because this allows black to get back into the game with a move like bishop h3, counterattacking white's rook. So yes, rook takes f5 would have definitely been a better move from Neeko here. Instead, from Myth, we have rook b8, so not going for this bishop h3 counterattack. And you may think this is okay too, because now white's bishop is hanging, my bishop is also hanging, so if you take my bishop, I'm going to take your bishop. However, it doesn't actually work because of this move, queen takes d8, and now obviously if you take with the b rook, then you're not attacking white's bishop anymore, so you have to take with the e rook. And now this is a problem because after simply rook takes f5, you have another hanging bishop on e5. So we could see something, if we saw something like rook takes b7, then we would see rook takes e5, and white would be totally winning here. So yeah, so this is why this rook b8 move did not work, or at least wasn't as good as this bishop h3. And we do see this sequence happen in the game. We have queen takes d8, and after rook e takes d8, we do not see rook takes f5 from Neeko. Instead, we see bishop f4. Not exactly sure what Neeko was thinking with this. This just makes things really complicated. There's so many hanging pieces. This piece is hanging, this piece is hanging. When this trade occurs, this bishop will be hanging. But yeah, this just makes things really complicated. If this bishop is taken, this pawn will be hanging. Lots of things hanging here. Rook takes f5 would have been the way to go. Bishop f4 is instead played on the board, and we have bishop d4 check. This is a check from Myth. So yeah, this is also why bishop f4 fails, because you can save this hanging bishop with check, and now after king h1, which was played in the game, now you simply take white's hanging bishop with rook takes b7. However, Myth did not play this. He did not play rook takes b7. Instead, he went for checkmate, because obviously if you can do checkmate or you can take a free bishop, you're obviously going to choose checkmate. So he went for the checkmate in one, bishop e4, and that's checkmate, and that's the game, guys. So thank you for watching. I'm kidding, of course. This is not checkmate. White actually has 3 legal moves, so it's not checkmate 3 times. And it's actually terrible for white or terrible for black. Not only is it not checkmate, but you actually lose a piece here after bishop takes e4. And you had 1 defender and white had 2 attackers, so you're going to lose that piece. So here, Myth could have traded here. It probably wouldn't have been a good idea because he's down in material now. He could have taken this pawn on b2, but instead we have rook e8. So just attacking this bishop one more time. We have rook a e1 from Neeko. And once again, this is another blunder. We were expecting a lot of blunders in this game, and we're getting them nearly on every move. So yeah, this is a blunder because it allows for this remove the defender tactic. So you are defending your bishop twice now. It's attacked twice. However, black can remove one of the defenders with bishop takes c3, and after b takes c3, they can just simply pick up this bishop, and black is all of a sudden back in the game. He would regain his piece. So yeah, Myth could have gone for this, but did Myth see this bishop takes c3 tactic? No, he did not. He went for rook takes b2 instead. We have rook takes b2, and maybe Myth was thinking that he's going to remove the defender of this knight, and then when the knight moves, he will be able to pick up this bishop since he'll have 2 attackers and white will only have 1 defender. However, this doesn't actually work because after knight a4, now the rook is attacked, and the rook is attacked. Once the rook moves, white will be able to save their bishop on e4. So black can still win 2 pieces for the rook and only be down in exchange, which will be better than being down a piece, because it's usually better to be down the exchange than to be down a piece. Black could do that with a sequence like knight takes e4, and after knight takes b2, we could have bishop takes b2, and here black would be down the exchange. So this is still better for white, but black would still have a game here. So Myth could have gone for this with knight a4. However, after rook takes b2, Neeko could have gone for this with knight a4. However, after rook takes b2, instead we have knight d5, and once again, blundering the game back to Myth. Now will Myth see that this bishop is hanging twice? He can simply take the bishop, and he'll be up a pawn. So will Myth take the bishop? He does. He plays knight takes e4. We have bishop e3 from Neeko, and now bishop e5 from Myth. c5 would have been much better, because with this bishop e5 move, first of all, you hang your a7 pawn. Secondly, you're disconnecting your rook from the defense of your knight, so this bishop can move anywhere, and it will be a discovered attack on the knight. You might think that this bishop can move to c1, attack the rook, and attack the knight, and this will be winning for white. However, black has this defensive resource of rook to f2. Now white can't take this knight because you hang your rook on f1, and if you trade rooks, then black saves the knight. So bishop c1, a good try, but it doesn't actually work. However, bishop takes a7, still a completely fine move, and this is what Neeko plays. We have bishop takes a7. Here, you really just got to defend your knight. You got to play f5. Instead, Myth plays knight d6, and this is a huge blunder because it disconnects the bishop from the pawn. A very natural move that a lot of players may play in this position that is still a blunder is knight to f6. You're just saving your knight, defending your rook so that this bishop is not pinned. However, this is a huge blunder, actually, because of the move bishop d4, and this is a fork on the rook and the bishop. The bishop cannot take, because if we have bishop takes d4, now we can play knight takes f6, removing the defense of this rook. Don't take with the bishop, you would get checkmate in 1. You have to take with the pawn, and now we have rook takes e8, and white would this would be a totally winning endgame for white. White would have this passed pawn and be up the exchange. So yeah, knight f6 does not work because of this tricky bishop d4 move, but we do not have this move anyway. We have knight d6 instead, which is equally bad because it allows for this knight takes c7 move, and here white is actually going to win at least in exchange. So if the rook moves off of the e file, then they lose the bishop. Black loses the bishop. So if the rook moves to e7, for example, now we could have this move bishop d4, this same tactic, because once again the bishop is pinned. You cannot take the bishop, and this is just a fork on the rook and the bishop. So we could see something like knight takes c4, and after bishop takes b2, knight takes b2, and knight d5, white would win the exchange like that and still have this passed pawn. This would definitely be a winning endgame for white. So that is rook e7, but that's not the move we had in the game. In the game, Myth played rook c8. So counterattacking this knight, his idea is, if you take my bishop, I'm going to take your knight. And Neeko did take this bishop. We have rook takes e5. However, Myth didn't actually take this knight. I think he missed that his knight was defending the e8 square, so he thought it was going to be back rank checkmate, because instead Myth played h6 here. But I just want to highlight what would have happened if Myth did go for this knight. White would still actually win material after rook takes c7 and the move bishop c5. And here the problem is you can't move or defend your knight, because if you defend it, then you just remove the defender. You can't recapture because there's back rank checkmate. If you move it, then you can move it anywhere. There's just immediately back rank checkmate. So yeah, you have to defend from back rank checkmate here with a move like h6, and then white simply captures the knight. White will be up a piece. So yeah, after this knight d6 move and knight takes c7, there's just nothing black can do. We have this sequence of moves where Myth ended up playing h6 instead of going for the knight, and this just allows white to immediately be up a piece. We have bishop c5 from Neeko, and knight takes c4 from Myth. We have rook e8 check, just forcing the trade of rooks, and Myth definitely goes for this trade. He plays rook takes e8, we have knight takes e8, and now knight d2 from Myth. We have attacking Neeko's rook, so Neeko moves it to f2. Now pinning this knight to this rook, so Neeko's up a piece. She definitely wants to be going for these trades. We have rook b1 check from Myth. Very good move, because now you're escaping this pin with check, and you can move your knight on the next move. You only have two pieces, so you definitely want both of them to be active. You don't want one to be stuck defending the other, or one pinned to the other piece. We have king g2, and now Myth getting back into this pin with rook b2. So yeah, here you just don't want to be stepping into this pin. When you only have two pieces left, you don't want one of them to be pinned to the other piece. So here a much better try for Myth would have been a move like knight e4. And this is hoping for Neeko to blunder rook f5. So here the rook is attacked and also the bishop is attacked. So you have to move your rook to defend the bishop with a move like rook c2. Here white would be totally fine. But if Neeko unfortunately played the move rook f5, black could totally get back in the game, because black has the same pin trick with rook b5. This pins the bishop to the rook, and white can't do anything. White's going to lose the bishop here. And if they move the bishop, they will lose the rook. So white can play anything, a4 for example, and simply rook takes c5. And this would probably be a drawn endgame, especially if white traded rooks here. So yeah, this would be drawn. And this could have been a good try from Myth, this knight e4 move. However, like I said, in the game, Myth played rook b2. And at this point, it's pretty much all over for Myth. There might be a few tricks left, but after Myth steps back into this pin, it's looking hard for him to win this game. We have a4 from Neeko and f5 from Myth. We have a5 from Neeko, just pushing that passed pawn, and it's hard to really get your pieces into the game when you're in this pin. You can't move the knight. You can't do anything with your rook because you have to stay defending your knight. Here, actually, on this previous move, Neeko could have actually played this knight takes g7 move, and it's kind of funny. You're just winning this pawn, because now the king can't take, because if king takes g7, there's simply bishop d4 check, and you'd win the rook. So yeah, Neeko could have played this tricky knight takes g7 move, but we have a5 instead, which is still totally winning, just pushing that passed pawn, looking to make a queen. We have knight e4 from Myth, and yeah, this knight was pinned to this rook, so you can't move this knight here. Will Neeko see that this rook is now hanging? Yes, she does. She plays rook takes b2, and yeah, Neeko is totally winning now. So let's see how she converts this. Myth picks up the bishop, knight takes c5, and we have rook b5, and this rook and this passed pawn are just too strong for the knight. So we have knight d3 from Myth, a6 and knight e1 check. We have king f2 and knight d3 check. Here, Myth could have actually tried for this knight c2 move. And now if white continues approaching the knight with the king, there's actually knight d4, which is a fork on the king and the rook. So the king could move anywhere, king d3, and knight takes b5, knight takes the rook. This is still winning for white because black's king is too far away, this pawn is too far advanced up the board, but this definitely would have given black better chances than what happened in the game, which was knight d3 check. And after king g2, we have knight e1 check, king f1, white attacks the knight and escapes the checks. We have knight f3 and rook takes f5. Here, Myth simply hangs his knight. He was moving very quickly, but he is in a lost position anyway. We have g5 and rook takes f3. And now let's see how Neeko converts this. We have h5 and a7, king h7, a8 equals queen, h4, g takes h4, king g6, h takes g5, king takes g5, and now rook g3 check. So sort of setting up that ladder, maybe Myth will make it easy and go to the edge. But we have king f5 trying to stay in the center. Maybe Neeko will stalemate. We have queen f3 check, king e5, rook g2, now setting up that ladder, king d4, rook e2, king c5, queen d3, king c6, and now Neeko gets the ladder with checks, so it's going to be very clean from here on out. Rook c2 check, king b6, queen b3 check, king a7, and rook a2, which is checkmate. So long game, lots of blunders, lots of missed wins from both sides, but this is what you get when you have beginners playing chess. A lot of missed tactics, a lot of missed wins, but that's what makes PogChamps fun. So Neeko takes the first game. Myth, can he bring it back in the second game? Take this match to an Armageddon? We just have to find out. So I don't think I have anything else to say about this game or this match. So check out the next game of this match over there, and check out my PogChamps 3 playlist up there. Thank you guys for watching. I love you all, and like and subscribe. See you next time.